All right. Hello. Shall we start? I think the people that is uh, outside the room, if you uh, come, you can. I think that you can bring your coffee and your biscuits, whatever you're eating. Please uh, join us. And, and well, welcome to the third session of the day. Focused on digital trade, specifically aiming at looking at the alignment of the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol and the WTO negotiations for African digital trade future. So my name is Max Mendez Parra. I am a principal research fellow at the International Economics Development Group at ODI Global. Today we have a very important panel of African knowledgeable experts on digital trade. And this is a very unusual panel, a very old panel, because it is sort of all digital, but it's sort of quite in line with the topic. But also makes me a bit of an odd figure in this sort of set of African and knowledgeable experts for three reasons. First, they are there, I am here. Second, they are African, I'm not. And third, they are knowledgeable, and I am, we'll see. But I think that the topic is clearly at the right moment, because I cannot de-emphasize the importance of digital trade and the digital economy that is having. I mean, digital is facilitating trade. It makes trade cheaper. It is making things that were not tradable today. So it has a fantastic transformation of the economies, and is sort of having transformations in its both of its dimensions, on e-commerce and on digital services. So e-commerce is facilitating like never before the provision of business to consumer trade, with significant implications. And probably you are very aware of everything that is happening at the moment with TEMU and so on. I mean, never before we have been listening about de minimis provisions associated with that. So it has generating these effects. But also on what is the provision of digital services, is facilitating that SMEs and even individuals participate directly in the formation of value in value chains by the provision of services, consulting, designing, many other things. You can have individuals that are engaging in value chain. So it's definitely transformative what is the impact that it's having. And of course, this is generating significant impact in the domestic economies, but also generating a lot of benefits, but also a lot of discussions that is happening. And we have discussions at the bilateral level, a lot of negotiations in chapters and digital chapters and digital trade agreements across the world. I mean, just to mention one, you can mention one that applies to Kenya, the UAE Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement with the UAE. Of course, a basic inclusive digital trade chapter. You also have regional or multi-country agreements. One of them, like the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, that it has its own digital trade chapter, as well as the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement that is gathering countries very in this part of the world, like Chile, New Zealand, Singapore, actually to create a framework to address a wide range of issues of interest to the parties in relation to digital trade. And of course, at the multilateral level, at the WTO level, there have been also very varied responses. Many of them are complementary, but also that they have contrast in terms of the focus they have. So we may mention basically the joint statement initiative that has led to the e-commerce agreement last year, still not completely approved, but basically that a group of 90-ish countries that have agreed on establishing rules and commitments in areas that go from free flow of data, data localization, and market access. But on the other side, you have also the multilateral work program on e-commerce that is also an alternative model to this, focusing more on cooperation and particularly on the development aspects of digital trade and e-commerce in particular, without strong commitments on that. And at the same time, you have the WTO moratorium on duties on digital transactions that is expiring in March, also is leading to triggering interest on what is going to be, and concern as well, an alternative to these arrangements that are expiring. And this for Africa has significant implications because all the discussions are happening in a sector that for Africa is of key importance. At the moment, the digital economy is represented around 5% of the GDP in Africa, and is anticipated, or is expected more than anticipated, that by 2050, we expect that the digital economy will be $1 trillion in Africa, or worth $1 trillion in Africa. And the Digital Trade Protocol of the AfCFTA is at the core of this expansion and development of digital trade and the digital economy in Africa. And I can say that the Digital Trade Protocol is at the frontier of what is the international practice in relation to digital trade. If you're looking at all the agreements that are being negotiated, in many aspects, they are the frontier. And I would say that something that Ambassador Mohammed said in the morning about being a rule maker, in many aspects, the Digital Trade Protocol is pushing the frontier, actually sort of moving what is the international practice. And this is the agreement. The Digital Trade Protocol includes rules and provisions in relations to free flow of data, localization, and market access, but also strong cooperation provisions to upgrade the digital trade architecture in the continent. I think that is also very important how strong are the provisions in the Digital Trade Protocol in relation to invoicing, e-contracting, paperless trade, that it aims to building trust, I mean, as an element actually to boost the digital economy and facilitate trade within the continent, not only digital trade, but also the traditional trade that might be boosted by the instruments that are developed on the digital trade. So beyond all these initiatives, there are Africans that actually are taking action. There are many businesses that are already trading. Of course, they are not expecting to basically having the negotiations be finalized. So a lot of things that are happening, but also businesses that are facing barriers to trade, digital barriers, but also that they are trying to seize the opportunities and benefit that Africa can benefit from the entrepreneurship of its firms and its individuals, particularly of its young population. So we are going to hear from a very varied group of distinguished African specialists, and I would like to introduce each at a time. So my first person that I would like to introduce is Lola Aworanti Ekugu. She is the CEO of AfriBorder, and she is very, very knowledgeable in relation to everything that is related to the fintech space across the continent, but also very importantly of what are the sort of the barriers that firms, particularly SMEs, are facing when trying to do cross-border trade, digital cross-border trade, across the continent and globally. So I would like to ask her precisely to her is what are the sort of those barriers that those firms are and people are basically facing when trading digital trade. Now is also as a second question on that, following to that is what are the sort of the rules that businesses, and also making reference to the discussion earlier in the morning about outcomes. What are sort of the outcomes that business are expecting from these regional and global rules to support, particularly startups and SMEs? So, Lola, thank you very much for being with us. So, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure to be here digitally connected to you over there in Nairobi. I think it's a really important conversation, and I'm happy to be a part of it. And thank you, Max, as well, for that fantastic intro as to what is happening across the continent. I think, just as you had alluded to, in fact, the digital economy is growing really rapidly. And Africa in itself and globally, I can even speak to digital payments. The economy is projected to reach about $1.5 trillion by 2030. And I think that sort of tells you what the businesses are doing, the amount of money that's going through the systems. I think we've also come a long way as well. You've mentioned key frameworks like the AfCFTA, the Joint Statement Initiative by the WTO to really help sort of speak to some of the challenges that the businesses are facing, but they are still challenges. Some of the challenges, maybe I'll start with the regulatory fragmentation and, of course, legal ambiguity and even maybe a bit of uncertainty. So what we're saying is, there are about 54 countries in Africa, or actually more, and, everyone has their policies, they have their definition, even some in terms of what is really sovereign data. There's a question around that. I mean, you have people with different policies around their data protection, their set electronic signatures, even I would say basic consumer protection. So we have a bit of fragmentation, some are outdated. And I think that, as I've said, it's been fantastic with the digital trade protocol, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done around domestication of that protocol, like by each country, aligning what it says in your personal country's protocol to what the digital trade protocol says, and also the joint statement initiative. I'll give just a quick example of, for instance, I know that in the Benin Republic, for you to move data out, you actually need a government okay for that. I know that in terms of registering, even like you come in as a fintech, each country is different essentially. So you still have to go through the hurdles of registering your company in each country. But I think you'll be pleased to hear that earlier this year, Ghana and Rwanda had a bilateral agreement for the first fintech license passporting agreement, which allows them operate. So if you're a fintech that's set up in Rwanda, you can just seamlessly set up in Ghana because of that. And I think it will be good to see more of that to really help us scale. Some of these startups or fintechs are giving real payment solutions and solving real problems for the continent. Another challenge is around digital infrastructure and connectivity. And I think, of course, there are a lot of, with developed Africa, I would say it's developing, right? So there's still a journey around that. So you still have issues around broadband penetration to some rural parts in terms of it being expensive as well. And it might surprise you, depending on how well you know about what's happening across Africa. There are some places that don't have reliable electricity as well. So even before you speak on data, first you need, electricity to actually run your system. So there are challenges around that. But we've seen some countries really take that on. I can say, for instance, in Nigeria, our digital economy minister is working on this 90 kilometers broadband cable to really help solve some of these challenges. And you would see different governments sort of working on PPPs to actually help achieve connectivity and really build the digital public infrastructure. Another thing is around payment systems inefficiencies and currency fragmentation. There's about 40 plus currencies in Africa. And historically, a lot of payments have been made using dollar as a baseline, given it's a stable currency. So largely, it's almost like you want to make a payment to your neighbor in Ghana, but first you would literally need to convert it to America. Technically, your money literally travels to America, then actually comes back to Africa, and then goes to the particular country. So I think that has been a huge challenge around making easy payments. Of course, even with a bank, takes about 3 to 5 days usually to make payments. But I think the good thing is we've seen a lot of progress in that sector. There's the PAPS, which is the payment settlement, Pan-African payment settlement systems, which is really trying to solve for that at a continental level. But then I think they're still on that journey. I think it's a tall order. But then you have even the East African payments settlement system as well. I know they're making progress on that. But also very importantly, there's a lot of fintechs who are actually trying to solve for that and trying to make payments seamless, like Flutterwave and Paystack from Nigeria. But again, that's the real challenge. And it's really how do we, harmonize? There's been discussions around things like a currency for Africa or a currency for West Africa, like an equal currency. But again, those are still largely in the discussions phase. In terms of movement, I think one challenge that we've seen a lot of businesses across every sector, even if it's digital and just trying to, trade across borders, is really around logistics. And I think we cannot emphasize that enough, that largely, even if it's e-commerce, most likely you have to, if it's not a service, you have to deliver, you have to actually deliver the item. And in terms of the historical logistic corridors, I would say some, especially, connecting perhaps East Africa to West Africa, it's sometimes easier to go outside the continent to come back if you were actually trying to, move a good or a service. So I think largely there are issues around that, and we're seeing lots of work and even like partnerships from even development partners around some particular corridors, like the EAC corridor, like the Lagos Abidjan corridor. So I think there is progress, as I've said, but again, there needs to be more. We need to see more. In terms of the second question, I know my time is running, so I'm trying to speak quickly. In terms of the question around, I think these rules can better support, and what are the sort of outcomes that startups are looking for, or fintechs or businesses in general. I think everyone really wants to be able to trade. I think the thought of being able to scale, I think, is a priority for the private sector and a lot of businesses today. How do we scale? How do we really take advantage of a larger market? And so I think, and how do we also move? How do we move physically seamlessly? How does our money move seamlessly? How does our data move seamlessly? How does capital move seamlessly? I think those are the key priorities for these businesses, and I really think the private sector. So I think there needs to be more work around, I would say, the formation of some of these policies, and maybe a bit more partnership between the WTO and the AfCFTA. I know that the Joint Statement Initiative has just about 7 African countries, and I think 4 from the least developed countries. And I think how can we sort of take that work and really use it with the WTO Joint Statement Initiative and really take it to the next level for Africa? How do we also perhaps enforce some of these, or maybe reward the countries that are actually doing well? as well. These are questions that we need to ask. I was actually in Nairobi last week, and there was a tea exporter, and she was actually working on the guided trade initiative. So she's in East Africa, and she was sending her goods to West Africa. And she said, "Oh, I don't want to call countries by name." And she was like, "I did it with this country, and it was fantastic. And then when it came to this country, she had challenges there." So how do we ensure that some of these things are, enforced? How do we, I'm almost done. How do we, even in terms of payments as well, there's been a lot of emphasis on PAPs as really the savior for the continent. But then there are smaller startups who are also really trying to solve the problem. How do we encourage them? I mean, I was at a private sector gathering, and I know Max was also there, and some businesses or fintechs felt that PAPS was really for the banks. So how do we, make it more inclusive? How do we also promote some of the policies around these startups and businesses who are really solving some of the pain points? Make it happen. Maybe I should stop there. I can see my time my time is up, but of course the discussion continues. Thank you, Max, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lola. Very interesting. I think that if I can get a word of what you said is about fragmentations of all the systems. I mean, we're talking about regulations, the regulatory system that is fragmented, payment systems that are fragmented. So is fragmentation the issue? And there is a solution for that is integration, potentially, to address that. So I think that very, very interesting to hear that. And we will come back to you, Lola, later. But I would like now to introduce the second panelist, whose name is Brendan Vickers. Brendan is the Policy Director at the International Chamber of Commerce. And clearly, what we are seeing here is that businesses are not sort of passive actors that are expecting that things are going to be sorted by the governments in negotiations, either in Geneva, in Yaoundé, or in Accra, whatever the negotiations are happening, but also they are engaging those negotiations. They are participating on them. They are feeding into that. And what I would like to hear from you, Brendan, is basically how is that the private sector is engaging in those negotiations, either at the WTO and in particular in relation to the Digital Trade Protocol of the AfCFTA, and more important now, particularly on the implementation of the Digital Trade Protocol. And also I would like to hear from you is, I mentioned earlier that basically the expiration of the WTO moratorium on duties on digital transactions is, how is that businesses are sort of preparing for that? How is expected that the expiration is going to affect global digital trade of goods and services? So Brendan, thank you very much for being here, and please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Max. Good afternoon, everyone from London. I wish I could be there with you in person. As a South African, I'm really missing the Kenyan sunshine today, being stuck on the soggy island of Britain. But I previously worked for the Commonwealth Secretariat for 10 years, so I bring that experience, and also now working, as Max said, with the International Chamber of Commerce, which is the world's largest business organization, representing 45 million companies across 170 countries that employ 1 billion people. So we really have a vested stake in these digital trade negotiations. We have been actively negotiating and participating through business delegations that go to Geneva, through our Global Commission in Paris, through our national committees, and making inputs into national processes as well. But as ICC, we're very focused on particularly 3 things: enabling global trade, shaping an open, trusted, and interoperable digital economy, and also strengthening multilateral cooperation. So, these things really come together and align with this conversation as we look at the digital economy globally, the negotiations in the WTO, and what's happening in the Digital Trade Protocol in Africa. Perhaps just I wanted to make one big observation and then pick up on a couple of the points that Max has made. I think the first is that we'd probably all agree that the global business landscape is becoming more complex, it's becoming more challenging. In some ways, it's the perfect storm facing business, particularly small and medium enterprises, particularly young entrepreneurs and women-headed firms, especially in Africa as well. On the one hand, we're seeing increasing volatility, disruption, uncertainty due to geopolitical friction. And at the same time, we're also seeing increased demands for transparency and traceability, security, sustainability, some of the issues that you spoke about this morning. But for business, whether you're big or small, the bottom line remains unchanged. We're seeking lower cost, reducing risk, and increasing resilience in supply chains. And I think that requires three things. The first is modernizing global trade rules to reflect today's digital economy. The second is to eliminate paper-based processes that slow down business and lock out small and medium enterprises. And the third is to expand access to trade finance, especially for small firms. And digitalization and digital transformation really underpins all of these three. From our perspective, as we participate in Geneva, with the African Continental FTA and the Digital Trade Protocol, we see a massive opportunity to really drag the trade system out of the 1800s, where we seem to be stuck, and into the 21st century, to eliminate the 4 billion pieces of paper that are circulating at this very moment through the trade system, and to make trade cheaper, faster, simpler, more secure, and more sustainable for everyone, including Africa. And that's the call for action. So as ICC UK, we've strongly welcomed the stabilized JSI WTO e-commerce agreement and the AfCFTA Digital Trade Protocol. We were actually we were there from day one, in a way, at MC11 when the JSI initiative was launched. We supported the Friends of E-commerce, and we've been a consistent vocal advocate ever since. I think it's important that our support also goes beyond the WTO. ICC United Kingdom and the COMESA Business Council, led by Teddy Subramanian, co-chair the Commonwealth B2B cluster, which has launched the world's largest reform program, legal reform digitalization, culminating a new Commonwealth model law on digital trade. We've also co-chaired the B20 Digital Transformation Task Force during the South African presidency of the G20, where we secured adoption of our recommendations on digital public infrastructure. So really important. And I think our feeling is that while the WTO agreement and the Digital Trade Protocol mark important progress and building blocks for the future, they really don't go far enough in delivering what business ultimately needs. And that's seamless data flows, interoperable digital systems, and frictionless digital trade at global scale. So we're seeing almost the emergence of a three-tier global digital trade architecture, where we have the WTO JSI agreement as a multilateral floor. That's not the ceiling of ambition. We have the Digital Trade Protocol as a very bold and ambitious regional template for a truly interoperable African digital economy, but it's regional, not global. And as we've heard, there's lots of domestic legal reform, implementation, and regulatory convergence that will be necessary. And then we have these very high ambition digital economy agreements where we as ICC UK have been very active as well, such as the Digital Economy Agreement between the United Kingdom and Singapore, but even more broadly between Chile, New Zealand, and Singapore, which are really setting the global standard, global benchmark around WTO work and even regional agreements. So the second point I wanted to make is just what Max referred to is the pending expiry of the WTO moratorium on electronic transmissions. This will happen after March unless a decision isn't taken. So our call to action for MC14 in Cameroon is quite clear. We need to renew and ultimately make permanent this moratorium. I think it's important we understand that the moratorium isn't just a technical rule. It really lays the foundation for digital inclusion, for economic growth, and for certainty around investment. It protects things like cloud-based tools and software, digital services such as remote education, telemedicine, online marketing, freelance work. It protects ebooks, training resources, research materials. There's creative digital content platforms and apps that support local industries and consumers, software updates and security patches that keep devices safe and affordable. So I think the implication is quite clear, and the impact is going to be immense. If we let the moratorium lapse, there's going to be increased costs, new barriers, further fragmentation, as we spoke about, locking people out of opportunity at precisely a moment when digital capability matters most. So we really do need to keep up the call, make it very clear that we need to make permanent and multilateralize this moratorium going forward. Thanks, Max.
Thank you, Brendan. And I think that I can take a lot of points that you mentioned. So in addition of the point of fragmentation, I think that the point about uncertainty that you raised is quite important, and also how the need of updating the trading system, not only for the digital trade hours, of course, need, but also in general, as you said, to bring it from the 1800s to the 21st century. And also the interesting points that you raised about that there is all this initiative, the JSI, etc., needs potentially to go further. And you mentioned also that the digital trade protocol is potentially particularly bold, but actually is regional. So the question I have, not you can answer it later, or basically for the room, is would the model of the digital trade protocol, the AfCFTA Digital Protocol, could be potentially exported to be something to be adopted multilaterally? So basically, as I said, not necessarily that all the countries joined the digital trade protocol of the AfCFTA, but the model, basically, the sort of the framework is something that is in the right direction of what the world needs. So it's a question that I would like to leave for later. So thank you very much, Brendan. And I would like now to, we were talking about a lot of what the private sector that is covered, but I would like now to bring into the policy side, the government side, and specifically because countries are developing strategies actually to engage in the digital economy, maximize digital trade. And Nigeria is one of those countries where it has been identified as the African Union digital trade champion and is pushing on a lot of actions on digital trade. It has ratified the digital trade protocol of the AfCFTA. And we have here Salihu Dasuki, who is the lead on ICT at the Office of the ICT Policy, at the Office of the Vice President of Nigeria. And I think that it would be basically good to hear from here is as a model that basically to think is how is Nigeria sort of aligning its own digital trade policies with the AfCFTA, how it's basically advancing on the implementation of the digital trade protocol of the AfCFTA, and with respect to the WTO digital trade rules. And also is particularly in respect to what Nigeria is doing is what are the governance or regulatory frameworks that are critical to ensure data privacy and cross-border flows in Africa? Because the governance of data, and as I was saying, I mean, is sort of the core of all this discussion in either WTO or the Digital Trade Protocol, with different models, with different approaches. So I would like to hear, is particularly in the case of Nigeria, is how is that is being sort of being considered in its own digital trade protocol? Is a digital trade strategy? Salihu, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Max. Yeah, I think Max was actually a co-champion with regards to the digital trade in Africa. But with regards to what Nigeria is doing, obviously there's a reason why we're the co-champion, and just like you mentioned, in November 2025, just within this month, we actually ratified the AfCFTA protocol on digital trade, and that's actually a major milestone. And such a ratification at the Federal Executive Council by His Excellency the President of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has shown the country's commitment to digital trade. Facilitating cross-border trade, not just within the continent of Africa alone, but also trying to show that we're compatible with global standards, and also alignment with also WTO. So, but how have we been doing this, and what have we been doing? And obviously, again, right now we have our Minister of Trade, who is very, very passionate about digital trade. That's one of our key priority areas. And what the ministry has been doing is actually coordinating and ensuring reforms around our policies, our trade policies, and also our e-commerce policies in order to enhance digital services and also, more importantly, electronic payments. The whole idea, obviously, is to reduce barriers to this cross-border trade and ensure that there is unnecessary restrictions with regards to information and data flow, and also ensuring localization of requirements, which can limit the chances of SMEs in Nigeria operating across the continent, especially Nigeria, which is known to have a lot of startups. So by providing this push for digital trade by the Ministry of Trade, we're actually trying to ensure that our businesses grow in the African market, and also try to also bring confidence into the Nigerian market. Currently, we haven't had a full-fledged e-commerce policy. Right now, one has been fully domesticated and developed and aligned to the AfCFTA and WTO, and this has also been possible also with the support of ODI, that has ensured that this e-commerce policy has been aligned to the AfCFTA, and currently that policy is on the table of the president with FEC, and hopefully that policy will be adopted, and which will also support Nigerian businesses to transact businesses not only in Nigeria but within the African continent and also globally, while aligning to the AfCFTA and WTO framework. So currently, we're working very hard. We're trying to ensure that we're fully aligned. That in order to enhance transparency of our digital services and our businesses, so that we can participate in the global economy, and this whole initiatives has also been done in alignment between not only the Ministry of Trade but also the Ministry of Digital Economy. Obviously, for us to have a digital, for us to really leverage on digital trade, we need to have a strong digitally savvy population. We already know that Nigeria has one of the largest population in the world, and in Africa as a continent as well. We already have different policies to enhance, to upskill our youths. We already have the 3M Team T, which is a 3 million talent program by the Ministry of Digital Economy. But with regards to digital trade, with the support of ODI and in alignment with our Ministry of Trade, we've been able to coordinate in the Office of the Vice President, where digital trade policies within the AfCFTA has been trickled down or domesticated into the state level. In some countries, we're going to call it the regional level. And then right now, with regards to obviously the key area when you're talking about cross-border payments, is actually providing the right regulatory policies with regards to cross-border payment. Our friend Lola has mentioned about PAPS, which has come out with Cowrie, that allows payment between different countries. But I'm gonna also highlight what she mentioned in the private sector engagement they had in Lagos with the support of ODI and the participation of the Office of the Vice President. And the argument is the PAPS is majorly for traditional banks, which limits a lot of fintechs to be able to plug in. But the interesting stuff also is what Nigeria is doing. Also, we've gotten the buy-in of the central bank, which is actually working on it. And also currently with the support of, again, ODI, the Office of the Vice President, in coordination with a lot of agencies, are working on a way to come up with the right policy guideline or strategies that will ensure that we can enhance cross-border payments for key players in Nigeria, but not only traditional banks, but also fintechs, by looking at what are the limitations and how can they leverage this so that everyone can play into this space that can enhance these cross-border payments within Nigeria. So there's a lot of these efforts out there. Apart from also this payment area, one key area is also the area of the payment stack in which Nigeria has developed. Already the payment stack is being also aligned to the AfCFTA and WTO principles. And then we also have the areas of building trust along this cross-border payments and digital trade, and that has to do with data. And then obviously we already know that we have our Nigeria National Data Protection Commission that has working seamlessly in ensuring that our policies are aligned to AfCFTA. Currently in Nigeria, within the Ministry of Trade, we have a dedicated coordinating body on AfCFTA and WTO. Within the Ministry of Digital Economy as well, and even currently within the National Data Protection Commission, we already have a team that is working on ensuring that our data policies are aligned with this AfCFTA policy and also the WTO mandates as well, in order to ensure that while data flows within this continent or globally, but it's well protected, and it's people's privacy, and there is trust obviously with this exchange of information and data. So currently these are just some few initiatives and efforts the Nigerian government has been making. I mean, I can keep talking and talking and talking, but right now I think we already have policies out there. We have key players, we have key support from the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and also our Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, in the Office of the Vice President. And we also have key ministers out there that are pushing for digital trade. So currently, we will continue to position our country as a regional leader in the area of digital trade and African digital commerce. And right now is a very, very exciting moment in which we're diversifying our economy in order to achieve the $1 trillion economy by 2030. And one area in which the Nigerian government is harnessing is the use of digital technologies and digital trade to achieve this this long-term vision. So I'll leave it there, and then I will keep on conversation going forward.
Thank you very much, Salihu. And I think that what you have highlighted is basically what all the heavy work that is after you negotiate something and agreed on something to making it happen at the national level. So there is a lot of actors that need to be engaged. The case of Nigeria is a federal state, so it's also competence that are at the state level that need to be engaged, but also the coordination even within the government of multiple institutions is also a significant element that needs to be considered. Also, the point that is also sometimes overlooked is actually how to build up the skills, actually, because it's not just adopting provisions, adopting protocols and so on, but basically is putting all the instruments, all the complementary policies that can support that actually countries and people can benefit from what that's negotiated, and building up the skills of youth and the population in general is one of those things. So thank you very much for your contribution. And my next speaker is the local credit. She's Nasubo Ongama, and she is the director of technology economy at Ohala here in Kenya. And this is basically all that this we are discussing in terms of either digital trade and all the components, whether it's the flow of data, etc., wouldn't be possible because there are not the technological solutions in place and available for businesses and people in general. So Nasubo, I would like to hear from you is what are the sort of technological innovations that are emerging to bridge, particularly one of the issues that is, we talked a bit earlier about fragmentation related to this, that is the addressing the digital the digital divide, and how is that could facilitate these solutions, digital trade in Africa. And also I would like to go a bit further into how is that digital trade, how can digital trade can foster broader economic inclusion and participation across, particularly of all the underrepresented groups. I mean, particularly whether this is the population in the rural areas that were mentioned earlier, particularly, again, returning to the fragmentation and the division, how is that we can sort of, using technological solutions, bring that necessary integration. So, Nasubo, thank you very much and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Max, and thank you for this opportunity. Yes, I'm in Nairobi, but unfortunately I was not able to join, but I still appreciate this opportunity to speak about the work that we are doing and how we are looking at digital trade and some of the technology innovations that are around. But before I get into the innovation, let's first unpack a little bit about digital trade and what it is, because I heard that we're looking at it from an e-commerce point of view. But when you strip it down, it's more than just e-commerce, more than just platforms. It's sort of like about power and who moves the African value when you look at it from an African perspective, and who sets the rules and the rules that we are expected to comply with. So as innovators, sometimes, yes, there are rules that have been fixed, but these rules really do not favor us. And that's why it stifles innovations if you look at it from that point. And so when we look at digital trade, we're looking at it long before any treaty is signed. We're looking at the rails. What is helping digital trade to run? So we're looking at devices. We're looking at the data that can run responsibly across borders. We are looking at authentication and trust, looking at the languages, because when you look at even how many of our African languages are digitized, you see that they are very few. We're looking at even the predictability of the rules that allow businesses to scale. And so from that perspective now, as Kala, which is a digital innovation lab, we are looking at trade more from a perspective of how can we build and break systems end to end. So what does this mean? Can we now create an environment where we are able to reduce costs by reduce the cost of devices by manufacturing them locally? Can we build AI and include AI in our that speaks like us, or has like a layer that is able to speak, let's say, the Twi language in Ghana, that is able to speak Yoruba, that is able to speak Swahili. So those are the things that we look at when it comes to innovation, because it is one thing to have all the right laws, all the right protocols, but unless the people are actually using it, then we are doing a disservice to our people. And so right now we're having this partnership with AfCFTA to try and operationalize the digital trade protocol. By doing so, we have the digital trade and regulatory sandbox that is a place to experiment. One, to see how can we increase smartphone manufacturing, how can we add or layer in AI applications, and AI applications that also speak in our languages, AI that is able to understand African people. I know the common case of M-Pesa had like a great regulatory environment to experiment and even innovate. So as an innovator, those are the kinds of things that we are looking for, and that's why this place to experiment that AfCFTA has allowed us to partner with is the right place to start with. Can we have more of these experiments across different borders so that we are able to ensure that young Africans can do more when it comes to even like mobile money transactions? How many of these transactions can actually be done cross-border? For example, M-Pesa versus in another country that uses MTN. So those are the things that we really want to look at. We really invite even different stakeholders to try and see what can we do. We have the skill, and I know Salihu has spoken about having the talent. Yes, there's the talent in Africa, but then we have to also be given us a place to experiment, a place to do more, a place to help us to produce more for things to be more affordable for the young Africans, and even just that layer of different languages speaking to one another, rather than, let's say, from Swahili to English to then English to Yoruba or English to Twi. Like those are the things that we are really looking at, and from an innovation point of view. And that's what Kala is really interested in, even as we start and operationalize this sandbox that we are partnering with AfCFTA. Yeah. Over to you, Max.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very interesting what you bring and all the initiative from basically facilitating that the digital economy reaches everyone, from working with different languages. Very interesting about having AI applications in the African languages, but also interesting that basically the idea of potential, produce devices, locally potential, with the idea of bringing the price down. That is eventually what will address the issue of the division and one of the dimensions of the fragmentation that was highlighted earlier. So, Nasuo, thank you very much for your input. And I think that now we can open the floor for questions and comments. I have already one there. So please, if you can introduce yourself. I have already two. Yes, Roslyn and the lady next to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Roslyn Ngeno. I'm the senior investment expert at the AfCFTA. And I just wanted to share a small note that our colleague that was meant to join us at this session shared with me. He's the senior expert on digital trade, Dr. Tokmo Chidede. And he shares that the AfCFTA Protocol on Digital Trade is Africa's continent-wide and binding framework on digital trade. And it is something that has been mentioned both by yourself, Max, and the team, the panel that is online. It reflects Africa's priorities, regulatory preferences, and developmental concerns. And it can serve as a very powerful reference point and negotiation baseline in the WTO GSI, and when the African countries are engaging with third parties bilaterally or primarily. It further establishes a unified Africa position for all the 55 African Union member states. And this gives African members a coherent bloc position to advance in global digital governance, strengthening Africa's bargaining power. And it also provides opportunity for interoperability in the continent. That is a comment I wanted to share from him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roslyn. I also extended to talk more, of course, a bit that he has the reference actually for bringing this statement. So thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Please.
Thank you. My name is Soit. I'm a trade and investment lawyer. So perhaps mine is just a quick comment in relation to a project that I'm currently doing on looking at the Kenya-UAE Economic Partnership Agreement. And part of that, we're looking at digital trade. So we've just realized with some of my colleagues that it's so difficult to find data on digital trade. And perhaps it's just something we can look at, like perhaps coming up with proper data on digital trade, and also looking at digital trade as an opportunity as opposed to traditional trade.
Thank you very much. And we have two persons, the gentleman here.
Yeah, I'll stand. My name is Eric from Trademark Africa. Happy to see Lola on the other side. So I have a few comments, and I'll just share so that as the colleagues are responding, then they could also reflect on the same. There's a lot of work definitely that follows the adoption of the protocol. The journey for ratification is still on course. And from the conversations we've had with most of the countries, there's a lot of socialization that is required for the protocol. the level of appreciation, not only for the protocol, but also for AfCFTA in general, especially amongst small businesses, mid-sized businesses, even some big corporates, is surprisingly not at the point where the continent ought to be or would expect it to be. So even as we push for digital trade, there's still a lot of work that we need to push for on the mainstream AfCFTA work. Now, there is a trade in digital services that heavily rides on trade in services as a matter of principle. There's still a lot of gap in the continent on trade in services in general. So even as we pursue digital trade services, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done at a foundational level for digital trade to ride on the same. The other thing I wanted to mention as well is, as Lola had mentioned earlier, there's a big gap in infrastructure. So data is growing so fast. I think now I was looking at another statistics here in Nairobi and this is by the Communications Authority, more than 80% of the cell phones that are pinged and they're able to record are actually smartphones. So that tells you the amount of data that is being generated in the continent, using Kenya as an example. And do we have the capacity to be able to support all this demand in terms of connectivity that then powers digital trade? So there's a lot of investment. We've not even started talking about AI and the required infrastructure to support AI in the continent. The other thing I want to mention is there's a gap, or there's an opportunity, let me say that, on the digital trade protocol, because if you look at the work like what Brandon's colleagues champion on with the DSI initiative on MLETR, the digital trade protocol does not clearly articulate, and there's no clear correlation between those two that you could outrightly identify. So there's a lot of work on how do you bring the protocol and give it life at an operational level. So there's that bridge that needs to be done. Definitely the MLTR is one end, but there's work done there to bring it on. The other thing I'll also mention that is fundamental on, especially on digital services, is taxation. So there are different principles that are being adopted on taxation of digital services, the continent. There is a significant establishment as a principle. There are other countries that are also using just direct digital tax, and their success has been very varied. And if you look at an SME, we've interacted, and I was giving this example somewhere. Some of the services, for example, that we support in Trademark Africa in different countries. So we'll get a tech firm from here in Nairobi to go and support delivery of a digital solution in Uganda or Tanzania or Rwanda. But because of the level of understanding and appreciation of the taxation of digital services and also issues around double taxation and mutual recognition around tax arrangements, SMEs tend to shy away from those complexities because it's too much for them to understand. So there's also a need to address the question of taxation as we attempt to address digital trade in general. Probably I leave at that, but then I mentioned two things. Our colleagues from ICC talked about the digital public infrastructure. That is the direction to take when it comes to interoperability. But how many people in the continent understands the principles behind DPI? Very few of us. And even those who are in policy in government, development partners like ourselves, the level of appreciation of such frameworks is still very low for us to be able to advance the work that we are doing. Yes, so I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the insightful sessions today. My name is Ron Sarkar. I'm the program manager for the Manufacturing Africa program. Happy to be here with you today. 2 points that I'd like us to touch upon. One, digital and any kind of digital dissemination and coordination requires regional and global coordination. Decision makers need to be aligned, and that comes down to alignment of interests. If you don't have alignment of interests, you'll be pushing the rock up the hill for a long, long time. So what are our thoughts and strategies around helping us unlock more and slightly easier with less bureaucracy by focusing on alignment of interests? That's one. And the other I'd like us to talk about is what are we excited about in terms of leapfrogging that this digital and AI journey can take us. So we've seen tremendous leapfrogging in payments. We've seen tremendous leapfrogging in education. I think education is one huge part that digital and AI can help leapfrog in Africa and other parts of the world. Any thoughts on that? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have a wide range of topics. I mean, let me summarize then. I mean, there is a comment in relation to the data on the availability of data on digital trade that I think that is very, very important to highlight. And I think that sometimes it's easier to get digital data on digital services easier than, for example, on e-commerce or goods traded digitally. But I think it's very interesting to discuss. Then we have a wide range of top points recent about the need of disseminate more about the protocol across the different elements of the population to basically sensitize them, etc. The point about digital services and the relation to the wider negotiations on services, the gap in infrastructure that exists is still to be addressed. Also an interesting point about taxation that is probably more touching about domestic taxation, because we have a big discussion at the moment with respect to the expiration of the WTO moratorium, but I think it would be very interesting to relate both and the aspects associated with the digital public infrastructure. So a lot of points. And then the latest point about how specifically on the coordination of us required to basically make all these processes happen, in particular on the digital space. And the important point about leapfrogging specifically on the digital economy, how is that the digital economy and AI be a sort of instruments, I mean, of aspects that are the two contribute to the leapfrogging for very diverse points. So I would allow the panelists to basically mix and match basically on the different points. What is that they would like to pick each of you? We are going to respect the order. I mean, Lola, please, if you can go first and pick those that you feel more comfortable to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think they're great comments and questions. I also sit on the board of Trademark Africa based in Nairobi that's doing some fantastic work around trade across the whole of Africa. And thank you, Eric, for your fantastic points. I would agree 100%. You made a comment around the knowledge of digital trade. And I think that came to my, I would say, real realization when we actually funded by ODI, we had a knowledge session on digital trade. And you could see that while the normal practitioners will think that, you know, it's digital, everyone understands it. But if you're looking at some of the businesses that we're expecting to engage, you would find that there's a huge gap in that. So I think a lot of the initiatives around capacity building on digital trade is extremely critical. So I would agree with largely all your comments. Another item I just wanted to touch on was the comment around leapfrogging in terms of using AI and I guess other digital technologies. And I was just going to give an interesting case of one I witnessed just last week while I was in Nairobi with the launch of, there was an e-customs portal which was launched by the Kenyan Revenue Authority. And what it essentially did is, really streamlining or reducing the time in which people were able to go through customs. But I think one interesting case study, which I think they're already sort of looking into, is how they can use AI for scanning. Because what's happening now is, of course, during the customs process, goods pass through the scanner. But if you think about it, there's so much power with what AI can do there in terms of understanding without even having to open up a truck that's going through the borders. You should be able to, if you're able to train your model, essentially, it can allow you understand and see, by the shape of the goods, this is definitely what this is. And of course, reduce the amount of human intervention. So I do think there's just a lot that, we can do with digital technologies. I think just on the NC14 upcoming that's happening, I think one of the important things which Brendan mentioned is really on that e-commerce moratorium and how this is really not the time for us to take that out. I think that there needs to be more coordination and I guess there's already a voice for Africa in a sense with the AfCFTA, as Dr. Tokmo had said. I think the question really is how do we then, harmonize some of these discussions and really be more inclusive when you think about the challenges that Nigeria and the rest of Africa, Ghana, Togo, Nairobi have, which are all completely, while it's Africa, they're all facing their different challenges and at different places in terms of the regulations to implement. So thank you. I think I'll stop there for now to allow the other panelists speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. Brendan, you
thank you, Max. Thanks very much for the comments. I think I also want to pick up on the point on Melita and paperless trade, because I think this is really fundamental. This is the entry point. This is where things start in helping you to digitize your trade and your supply chains. Basically, for those that aren't familiar, there's a model law on electronic transferable records. Basically, by adopting this law and ratifying it, it means that a digital document and a paper document are legally equivalent. They have functional equivalence. It doesn't mean you have to use digital, but you can't be denied from it being accepted legally valid. So I think that's really important because that lays the groundwork for digitalizing your supply chains, for digital trade finance, for digital customs, being able to submit things in digital format. And this means it's not just a scanned PDF, it's actual structured data that goes into a system. I agree that the Digital Trade Protocol doesn't explicitly mention Melita, but I think ultimately, once it is ratified by member states, there will be pressure and there will be a natural push for countries to start aligning towards Melita-style standards. The Commonwealth Model Law on Digital Trade is a new law recently launched, I think the last 2 months or so, which is explicitly designed not only to support countries with paperless trade, but also to fill in some of the gaps which are also needed in the broader legislative and regulatory architecture. So there's likely to be a push once countries start adopting this. But there's a lot of domestic work and legal reform that has to happen. Just because you ratify the Digital Trade Protocol doesn't mean that your laws are in place. Your laws could be contradictory, could be laws that need to be updated, reviewed, new legislation passed. So that's a big challenge that lies ahead. And then also just the interoperability of standards. We have the Digital Standards Initiative, which is doing a lot of work to harmonize certain data fields that are essential key data points. For example, if we all agreed in the world what data format to use, is it year, date, day, month, year, day? It has serious implications for finance, for payments, for release of goods. So the DSI is really working on these frameworks to harmonize data standards so that ultimately, in the future, one option, for example, working with the technology vendors is if you in your Excel and you create an invoice and you, instead of saying print to PDF, you could have an option print to digital, which means everything goes out. You don't need to change your system, but in the background, there's an interoperable system that will align those data fields for you. So really important. Just probably another point. And once you've gone, I think this is the experience of the United Kingdom and others that are more advanced around, Melita alignment. Once you go further, there's the prospect of having these real digital trade superhighways where it is end-to-end digitized. And you need to see this as an entire ecosystem, whether it's the buyer, the seller, the customs, the finance, the shipper, the insurance, the ports. And we've been supporting a number of pilot projects that fully digitalize this process end to end, often across jurisdictions from the United Kingdom to Singapore, Singapore to China. And the results speak for themselves. I've just pulled them up quickly. Up to 80% reduction in transaction costs when documents of title move to digital originals. Cross-border processing time falling from around 25 days to just 1 day, with documents issued and transferred within minutes. Trade finance gap reduced by 50%. So, these case studies speak for themselves. And I think it's important that, in Africa, we start having these pilot transactions between Kenya, South Africa, Kenya, Rwanda, to really provide the evidence of why digitalization really makes trade cheaper, faster, simpler. So, if I was going to leave you with one thing today, it's those 3 words. Max, maybe you can get everyone to repeat it at some point. It's cheaper, faster, simpler. That's what digital trade and digital trade finance is all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. And it was cheaper, faster, and simpler. Just to remind
That's it. Cheaper, faster, simpler.
Salihu, please, your comments.
Oh, thank you, Mark. So my comments will be around DPI, Digital Public Infrastructure, the one of the actor from the development partner mentioned about, which was critical. And in terms of Nigeria as a country, we've identified the importance of DPI. That's also one of the key priorities of the Ministry of Digital Economy. Currently, right now at the presidential level, we even have a committee on DPI to ensure a full rollout of the adoption of this framework. Currently, our national identity card serves as a key foundational element across every transaction within Nigeria. So we have our DPI, we've been pushing for it. And then obviously we know to support this framework, just like Lola said, the government is investing a lot in the 90,000 kilometer broadband connectivity. But just to even pass out something important, because of this framework, recently also Nigeria has launched the ECOWAS identity biometric card, which is to allow for free movement of goods and services, cross-border trade within the ECOWAS level. Currently, at the Office of Vice President, already with support of ODI, we have a research being done around digital payments and identity. And then based on the conversation that happened last with regards to the launch of this identity card, is to look at also how it can align to the AfCFTA. And currently also there's a pilot that should be coming up, which is called the Digital Pass. That's been done also with the Ministry of Trade and the AfCFTA Secretariat. So DPI is something that's key for Nigeria. There's an alignment and then there's a push going towards there in terms of how can we trade, how can a guy from South Africa verify a guy in Nigeria very, very easily. So DPI is something that's very, very interesting. And that's a very, very key area that the Nigerian government is pushing towards with regards to a full adoption of this framework and having our own DPI for trade framework that aligns both to AfCFTA and also the WTO. Thank you.
Thank you, Salihu. And Nasubo, please, come in.
Okay, cool. So let me start with, I think it was Rosalind's question about data and how data can unlock opportunities. And then data is, data also requires policy and then technology and a place where business can also experiment. And that's why I still call for a place where people can experiment, people can look at how to turn that evidence into something that is tangible. So for me, like the biggest takeaway is, can we get a place where we are bringing in the different stakeholders? We can even start with some African countries, because what I know is that digital trade may not have been very well known because people are not seeing it in action. So unless people see it in action by practicing and taking it seeing the actual movement of goods and even services, and when governments align on how they can allow for free movement, I think that would be the only way. So my call is, can we now bring can we have conversations to allow different countries, and it can be still facilitated by AfCFTA to allow us to speak together, learn to experiment, learn to see what are the challenges, the actual live challenges on the ground, so that we can unlock more digital trade that is more visible and people can see it and can see it in practice. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nasubo. And we have 5 minutes. I don't know if we have another pending question around. No, I could make a question, or I can leave the people actually set it free. Because I mean, I would like to basically be a bit provocative and being a bit plain devil's advocate, because there is the point about the WTO moratorium. I mean, basically the expiration of the WTO moratorium, and basically we all understand basically what is the importance of keeping basically that moratorium in place and making it permanent. I will agree with that, but also at the same time, clearly what many members are sort of saying about recovering some policy space in relation, that this is the position that India and South Africa have been keeping, particularly to set up duties and raising revenue in a context where, for example, we are seeing that the tariff revenue is being cut by, for example, the action of some platforms that are sort of setting bandit warehouses and then releasing consignments under de minimis rules. So I wonder what is the sort of middle ground, and what is the sort of thing that we can potentially think to basically address, basically at the same time that we are not raising transaction cost and duties on digital trade, but at the same time we are not undermining the revenues of countries that in many cases are being used in very important policy objectives. So I don't know if there is any of the panelists want to comment on that specifically, if there is anyone in the room. If not, basically we can finalize the panel here. Nobody in the panelists come to comment that, but
I could just just jump in and just briefly say, Max, I think, from our perspective, the analysis that we've done as ICC globally, the costs of not renewing the moratorium outweigh the benefits of doing so. The calculations of tariff revenue, particularly some of the most cited studies, have often flawed methodologically, really apply to the G20 countries, don't really look at the impact on smaller economies, creative economies, entrepreneurial economies, as we find them in Africa. There are probably more efficient ways around resource mobilization, revenue raising in Africa, starting just basically with more rigorous customs inspections, border processes at home, often even just digitalizing from there, looking at what's exactly coming into your economy, because that could often also be a source of revenue, given practices at borders. But then there definitely are alternatives around taxation, whether it's VAT or GST on services, corporate income tax, digital services tax. So there's just strengthening tax compliance as well, excise taxes, and there's just many options. So we don't think the answer is doing away with the moratorium.
Thank you very much, Brendan. We have a comment, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an explicit opinion. From where I sit, ideally, I would not have maybe my own personal ones. But I agree with Brendan on the dynamics. The local benefits that come with having some of the big businesses operating the continent, there has to be in-depth analysis of where do you get your revenues more, because the question for the continent is more around revenue. And I also recall when the protocol was being negotiated, the question of the lost opportunity on revenue was the biggest. So I guess one of the approaches to help in getting a direction would be the arguments around the lost opportunities for having that space liberalized. And also I agree as well with Brandon on definitely that will open a new cans of worms on taxation that I don't know if the continent is ready to handle. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. So it was cheaper, faster, and simpler. That is what the thing that we have to remember. That should be the motto. So,
sorry, Max. Just yeah,
sorry, yeah.
no, I just want yes, I just wanted to add something quickly, and I totally agree with Brendan and Eric. But I think what we just need to remember is that the digital world is evolving every day. And, you know, for now, I think this analysis has been done. And I think I'm happy that Brendan could also give some details on that. And the benefits are as of now. But I think this is something that I agree we will continue to look at. The point I'm making is that it's evolving. 10 years from now, it may be different. But for now, you know, it's not the time. Just to state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. And if not, I think I would be now in position of closing this session. Thank you very much to the panelists, to Lola, to Brendan, to Salihu, and to Nasubu for their time and your expertise and wisdom. Thank you very much to the people, the rest of the people that is participating online, and also the people here at the floor. Have a very nice rest of the day. And I think that we continue with the program that is, we are, sorry, I don't have it here. All right, thank you with the closure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.